What have we been learning about the Yates? Oh, okay.
If you
We've
want
been
to.
learning a little bit about the Yetzer Hara. I have this, I bought this, I don't know, at Yeshivas and Rabinas, a book called His Final Mission. It's a compilation of Avram Tversky's stuff in relation to guard your eyes. You know, there's this website against internet addiction that they set up, and he was very involved. In case he has over here, he had written like a short word for each parsha, and they put it together here, and obviously it's all related a little bit to addiction somehow. But on Parshas Azinu, Moshe Rabbeinu reprimands Bnei Yisrael, reprimands as a perverse and twisted generation, right? Pasuk Perek Lamed Beis, Pasuk K. When we allow our desires to influence our thinking, we were learning about this, about the Chofetz Chaim, the Satan, the Tahara, how we influences our thinking. We can be perverse and twisted. He writes, one recovering alcoholic that in all my years of drinking, I never, what is that? In all my years of drinking, I never once took a drink unless I decided it was the proper thing to do at that time. Moshe said that the only way to avoid becoming victims of our distorted thinking is ask your elders and they will tell you. Next pasuk over there. Because we can't rely on our objectivity. We have a Yetzer Hara. We have our types. And like this guy said, you know, anytime he wanted to drink, he always had a cheshbon why it was the right thing to do it. I remember years ago, I had a friend and I asked him how does he go to sleep if he has a kasha, if he's learning and he has a kasha, how do you go to sleep? And he said, whenever he wants to go to sleep, he always has an answer. In the morning, he suddenly realized it really wasn't an answer, you know? So your mind is very flexible and and therefore ask your elders and they will tell you, accept guidance from wise, experienced, and competent people. It's a nice gaiva to rely on your own mind and think that you know best and you know right. But it's very dangerous also, besides being guy, because that's what what we were learning in Chovos haLevavos. My brain, I'm meshuchad by my tables. I'm blinded. And I think I'm being so objective and so clear and it's so right. And, when you're an outsider listening to the argument, sometimes it's almost funny, but it's not nice to laugh in the guy's face that he's giving these arguments and these things. And, okay. So Chabi Elias Nishma says, Zriel Betzalo Ben Yonatan Aaron. Should have gotten, what's his name, Chaim on this chat today.
Yeah, usually they do a yard site on the Zoom and everything. I spoke to his father yesterday, but this year comes out on Shabbos, so they're
no, but Chaim is part of this chat. He should be here.
Yeah, for sure.
In any case, so he says, accept guidance from wise, experience, and competent people. Shlomo Melech said, all of a person's ways are right in their own eyes. You always think you're right. And if you think you're right, it's very hard to hear from somebody else. Yes, he was. We must recognize our vulnerability to self-deception. Our desires twist our thinking. Our ability to rationalize is immense. We're capable of justifying the most outlandish behavior, and we think, like Yisrael says, we think we're right in our own eyes. It's like to the extent of sometimes you can't even point out to the guy where he's wrong. Like we say back home, there's nobody home to speak to. He's so clear. But okay, it was just something that I noticed today. Okay, we're on page 151. What was he saying here? We had said over here, let's go back a little on top. get back into this somewhere. Va'al, okay, on page 147. 46. Don't contradict what your parents and the earlier generations, the advice they gave you. Because there's no suggestion that may enter your mind that they have not already considered. Many times we have that arrogancy. We have the question that's going to upslug everything, that's going to prove everything wrong, as if Chazal and our Rabbanim and our Gedalim didn't think of that question. And I'm the one who discovered the universe, created the universe, and I have the question that he says, so I'll tistar when they give you advice, don't be so quick to go against what they're saying. And they evaluated the implications of every idea in terms of what good it might bring, and what harm it might bring. And it may initially recognize the positive aspects of an idea. Right? Yeah, it sounds good. There's a lot good going for it. Rabbi Berry once, I don't know exactly what the background was, but he was with Reb Noach Weinberg, and Reb Noach told him that there's a chiyuv to close your Gemara. You have to be willing to close your Gemara to do kiruv. We're losing everybody. You have to do kiruv. And he was very convincing. Rabbi Berry Mamash, had nothing to answer. It made so much sense. And then he went back to his yeshiva. He was learning then in Itri, and he spoke to one of the Rabbeim, and the Rabbeim said to him, if someone has some illness in his body and they need to amputate, right? You can amputate any part of the body. If you have to cut off a foot, you have to cut off a foot. You have to cut off a hand. But you can't amputate the heart, no matter how sick as the guy is. If you can cut out his heart, so then the body dies. He said, learning Torah is the heart. You can't amputate the heart. It may mean that certain parts of the body may not make it. But if you amputate the heart, then so the Chovos haLevavos is saying many times the first thought, it sounds like a very good idea, and there's a lot of truth to it. But what's hidden from you is what will be down the road? Right? What's going to be down the road if we don't have limud Torah in the world? It's true. You may lose certain parts, and no one's minimizing that. But if you cut out the Torah, then you lost the whole body. You lost everything. But just an example of what he's saying. And therefore, we have to turn to our Chazal. We have to turn to our Gedolim and our forefathers and the earlier generations to direct us. They had a outlook. They are the Chacham, Ezu Chacham Areis Hanoila. They were able to see what this could, what the ramifications of such an act could be, not just in this generation, but many generations down the road. Chacham said, don't move back the boundaries that existed from the days of old. Don't change it. Asher also have a secha that your fathers made. Shema b'nei musar avicha. Listen, my son, to the instructions of your fathers. This means the younger generation receive and accept the traditions that were handed down to them from their fathers. It's said about someone who deviates from the custom of his forefathers, says also in Mishlei, it's an incredible statement. A generation that is pure in his own eyes and is not even washed from its childhood filth. He said the baby still has his dirty diaper on him, meaning that you're still a baby. You're far away from the chachma, from the wisdom of the earlier generations. And yet you think that you're able to belittle them and deviate from their customs, that you know better. So someone else says you're still in your dirty diapers. So like a chutzpah. Dar aviv yakalo. Says also in Mishnah, a generation that curses its father. V'sima lo yivorech, and doesn't bless his mother. V'omar, it says there further, ayin tilaglav, and I, the makzah father. Achim tira lekabel atzmocha mitayseves harishus b'mitzvah. It says, however, it would be permissible and even praiseworthy if you choose to take upon yourself optional additions to the mitzvahs, masha tuchal, to the extent you're able. Achash tamali chavoschem and mitzvahs, after fulfilling your required obligation to the mitzvahs. As we mentioned yesterday, that after the first part of the series Yesharim, you come to precious, which is going beyond the letter of the law, but you can only go, says the Chazal, beyond the letter of the law. You can only take on extra things and extra things if you're doing the law first. You can't skip that. And you're doing it by a love of chesed, he calls it piety, such as if you wish to do more kindness than the Torah requires to you. And this stringencies make sense to you, and they're far away from being influenced by your taivus, your wrong-headed desires. Then it'll be good. You'll get reward for it. Okay, now this is where we were up to, if I remember correctly. I'm assuming you can only do this with everything he's saying. You don't feel you're influenced by your desires, and you fulfilled the letter of the law, and it makes sense to you. But it's assuming that your reasoning for adopting stringency is valid. Go ahead and doing so. And by doing so, you will not be deviating from the opinion of the early sages. Make a fence around the Torah. This refers to a symbolic fence which is made up of any stringencies that you feel will keep you from violating a prohibition of the Torah. That's how the Messiah Sharm also defines precious. It's a fence that you're making, a personal fence that you're making that you feel can protect you personally. You could see that this act you're doing, even though it's mutter, down the road, it could cause you to do averis. The Shari Tshuva also says somewhere that you should do without mutter hanos. He points out here, Rav Miller says, that when you take upon yourself such a thing, a voluntary restriction, you have to remember, it's only upon you. You can't make these for other people. You can't make restrictions and take chumras and say, I'm doing it, so now someone else has to do it. V'omru Chazal already told us, why did Yerushalayim become destroyed? Because they based their actions strictly on the letter of the law. They did not go beyond the strict requirements of the law. Right? Okay, you didn't do the beyond when there's chema, right? The Gemara says somewhere that you're not mechuyev to wear tzitzis, because the mitzvah of tzitzis is if you have a 4-corner beged, then you got to put on tzitzis. But let's say I don't have a 4-corner beged, so I don't have to put on tzitzis. But the Gemara says somewhere, b'shas, when there's anger, when there's chorinaf in the world, you get punished for not putting yourself in the situation of doing a mitzvah. You have an opportunity to do a mitzvah. It's not an all, it's an opportunity, and you turn it down. A little bit of expression of like, what says in the Teichacham, what's wrong? Where does it say you have to serve Hashem b'simcha? You don't serve Hashem b'simcha. It means it's not really, you're not serving Him willingly. You're just doing it because you got it, because you're scared, whatever. It's not a very positive, someone who's very positive and knows what Kiras Hashem is and knows how terrific it is, mitzvahs and opportunities and searches to the mitzvahs, can do with simcha. Someone has opportunities to do mitzvahs and he chooses not to put himself into the chiyuv. You're not chayiv. You're not chayiv to do the mitzvah. You don't have to wear tzitzis. I used to tell the guys, it's such an easy mitzvah, just put it on. You can forget about it. And even if at the beginning you're a little uncomfortable, you get used to it, and then you put it on in the morning, and you're doing a mitzvah daraisa a whole day. the whole day. It's like some mitzvahs are hard, to sit and learn the whole day is hard. But some mitzvahs are relatively easy. And if you don't choose to do it, then, I don't want to say I'll tiftach pel something, but there's a taina. Why aren't you choosing to do it if it's so easy? So here the Gemara says that the Churban, Yishai was destroyed because they didn't do Lefnim Mishur Sadin. They didn't go beyond the strict requirement of the law. You don't have to. What kind of taina is it? You're right, you don't have to. But by the fact that you don't do it, it's a certain expression. It's a certain taich of all your accents, of how you relate to your Torah and mitzvahs. And it says in Avodah Zarah, Gemara Avodah Zarah, whoever only studies Torah, it's as if he has no God. From this you learn that person is without a true God. It's not enough to do Torah, you also have to do Gemilas Chasadim. So Miller here explains, let's see how he explains this Gemara. It's an interesting Gemara. He says, why is it that the person who doesn't do any more than learning Torah is like one who has no God? Because any kindness that he does is limited by the specific requirements of the Torah law. Let's say that someone asks you for your help, and you do just the minimum that the Torah requires. But that person may need more than the minimum. If you're sticking with the letter of the law, you're violating the wishes of Hashem, which is for you to do more than the minimum. So Nazi's understanding, when it says Kol Esek B'Torah B'Vad, means that I'm doing the letter of the law. It doesn't mean that I'm only learning Torah. It means I'm learning Torah and fulfilling the Torah. But just as what it says spelled out in the Torah, not going beyond it, not getting the message. You're not getting the message. If a person does want to do more than minimum, that shows he has no loyalty to Hashem, right? If you love the person, you care about the person who's telling you what to do, you're going to try to do it in the best way possible. Again, I think it's the mashal of the Mesirat Yesharim. If father asks you to get you a cup, he's thirsty. Give me a cup of water, but you know that he loves orange juice, cold orange juice, then sure, you could fulfill his wish by bringing him a cup of water, going to the sink and filling with water. But if you have loyalty to your father, you're going to go and walk to the fridge and get some ice cubes and get this, pour it to him in a beautiful cup. This is why it explains in Tanakh that many days passed by for Yisrael without a true God, although they didn't forsake Hashem. They were stuck in a rut and didn't do all the things they should have volunteered for in order to perform true kindness. So it's a very interesting pshat. Kol Esek B'Torah B'Vad means you're only fulfilling the Torah as it says, without doing the Fnim Mishur Sadin. V'omar echad min hachasidim. A pious man once said, a person who doesn't do more than his duty has not done his duty. Going beyond one's duty is not accepted till his duty is fulfilled. So that's what he's saying. What we were saying, a person who doesn't do more than his duty hasn't done his duty, because if he's not doing beyond the letter of the law, that's a reflection on what he is doing. It's like, I got to do it. It says it. And I believe there's a God, there's punishment, there's reward. So I got to do it. That's the most basic way of serving Hashem. Childish way of serving Hashem. Just like a child will do something if you give him a candy. And he won't do something if he knows he's going to get a potch. You don't consider that he's really serving his parents. Right? Because look, he's listening to them. No, it's when he's older, and then they tell him to do something. Then he's serving Hashem. Then he is but you can't do beyond that. You can't get into the frumkeit, and you can't get into the extras unless you do the duty, because if you don't feel yourself bound to the actual halacha, to the letter of the law, then what you're doing is not outgrowth of that. It's just it's all about you. The optional is acceptable only if you have already fulfilled the center. If you insist on only doing what you must do, and you won't even fulfill that. That's the two sides of what the chassid said. It's only when a person is willing to do more than he has to do that he can at least be certain that he's doing what he must do. If you volunteer to say additional tillim after davening, but fail to pay attention to what you're saying during davening, then your addition is not acceptable. First do the minimum and daven properly, then you could add to it. And he says, Chazal not only permitted us, but obligated us to do beyond the minimum of the mitzvahs. Tomorrow in Yuma, you have to add from the chol on the kodesh. You could add to the hours of fast by continuing to fast into the night. But tefillah, you could add tefillah, anything you wish. Tzedakah, you could add charity by giving beyond your minimal obligations. You could refrain. This is also going beyond the letter of law. You can refrain from overindulging in lavish foods that you don't need, but which are permitted to us. Let's say you're at a banquet, and after you've already eaten enough, they serve elaborate delicacies, including ice cream, right? You have what they call the Viennese table. You go to a wedding in America, and some weddings, I remember sitting with my wife at actually an Art David guy's wedding. I think I told you about it. And there was there was the smorgasbord, which trust me was a whole meal. And then it was like a 4-course meal. You were full. And then when they brought out that Viennese table, you would think that people didn't eat yet. They hadn't seen food for a week. It took about 5 minutes and there was nothing left on the table. You may decide to exert self-control and decline the ice cream. That's a voluntary exercise of restraint because it's not forbidden to eat. The Alter Sabat had a practice of just looking at dessert and pushing it away no matter how good it was. Why? He took a degree of precious upon himself, and that's a righteous thing. Although eating the extra food is not forbidden, it's a mitzvah to practice self-control and temperance. Lamaisa, right, the Ramban on Kadeshim to you says that it's a mitzvah saseh of not being a manuval, which Kadeshim to you means doing just that. Not allowing yourself to overindulge, even though it's kosher. Yisiru al shvuas b'Hashem. Chazal admonished us not to take an oath in Hashem's name, afil al emes, even for the truth. Right, and you hear stories about Gedolim that al pi halacha they were mischayim to swear. And even though they knew that if they swore, they'd be part of making payments, and they knew they were saying the emes, but they would rather pay than take a shvua, even though it's a shvua emes. These are all parts of beyond the letter of the law. He says, from excess conversation, even if you can be careful and you won't be any lying or falsehoods, and staying away from talking about others, so you go into Lashon Hara or anything like that. Even though what you're saying is not to anyone's discredit, right? But it's midas chasidus to minimize your conversation. Be careful not to praise a person excessively. Even though he deserves it, the Chofetz Chaim calls it avak lashon hara. When you praise someone excessively, it's human nature that people say, "Oh no, you're overdoing it. I happen to know that he does this. I know he does that." You become a cause, even though you only meant good and you said good. But when you do praise someone too much, it could be a trigger for others to say something negative. says also, if you're praising, you may be in danger of over praising, and that would be flattery. That would be chanifa. And don't speak ill or contemptuously of people who are inadequate in their observance, even though they deserve it. There are many other teachings like that. Okay, so he's saying over the idea of preachers. And I'm not following how this grew out of the earlier thing. For that, we have to go back and learn the whole thing again. But this concept, that it is a Jewish concept, we don't go and become a hermit somewhere. We're mechuyev to live a normal life. But excesses, both in Ruchnis and Gashmias, is not necessarily good. Typically, when you're not fulfilling yet the letter of the law, to go and do more than that. On the other hand, if you are doing the letter of the law, there is the madregas of the Hasidim or the Tzaddikim, Krushim, to protect yourself and make your personal Gedarim to keep you away from Averis by being not answering, not doing even things that are mut. Okay, everyone should have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.
See you guys on Sunday, Bez Hashem. What?
My
Everyone
brother
should
wants
stay
to
warm.
know- my brother